Next, we have a presentation from GTI Resources with the ticker code GTR to tell us more about their ISR uranium projects in Wyoming, USA. I will now hand you over to Executive Director, Bruce Lane. Good afternoon, Bruce.
Hi, Jane. How are you?
Very well. Let me pull up your presentation.
We're in the process of acquiring a new ISR uranium project or series of projects in Wyoming in the US. And you can, So look, in summary, what I'm going to run through today is the location of the projects in Wyoming and our focus on ISR with these projects. They're sandstone hosted roll front projects, and they've got pretty compelling exploration potential. ISR in the US was commenced in Wyoming, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. We're targeting economic mineralization, and we've got a strong team who've got discovery experience, and we believe that they'll be able to bring that to bear on the projects. So next slide, please, Jane. So look, before I get started on all that, we've heard a lot about uranium and what's happening with the price and what's been happening in general with the move towards clean energy or emissions-free energy in the world. So I won't dwell too much on all of that, but what I'd like to talk about a little bit more is why the US is a bit different and why we're really interested and focused on what we're doing there as a jurisdiction. As I said, I won't talk about the supply squeeze in general, except it's pretty self-evident from the price that is being brought to bear at the moment, or it's coming to a head. I think $50 a pound plus starts to make a lot of projects look a lot more interesting. The US opportunity is compelling. Nuclear energy is obviously a massive part of their energy supply, and they are the largest consumer of uranium on the planet. And what's interesting is that since what was a massive boom in exploration and development in the States in the 70s and 80s, there's been a collapse in their industry in both mining and exploration. And if you look at recent statistics, you'll see that there's been virtually no uranium produced, or very, very little in North America in particular, and in the US. And exploration, has in turn obviously collapsed as well. However, we believe that is, as we speak, turning around, not just because the uranium price has picked up in the last month or so, but because the US has realized that strategically nuclear power is extremely important to its future, and in turn so is uranium and the enrichment and value add cycle for uranium. So 50% of US clean energy comes from nuclear, and it underpins their ability to achieve their emissions targets going forward. They simply will not achieve the targets if they retire their nuclear power and nuclear reactor fleet. Jennifer Granholm, the new Energy Secretary under Biden, has made some very, very strong statements, and almost on a daily basis at the moment is espousing the benefits of nuclear power in terms of achieving the US's climate objectives. And I think Brandon earlier alluded to the fact that some US states, and Illinois is probably the most notable recent state, has reversed its decision to retire its nuclear power plants and is going to support them going forward. So that's a very strong signal that the nuclear energy business in the US is going to continue on and probably grow. So we're targeting the development of ISR amenable uranium resources in Wyoming. We've acquired some projects that are in the Great Divide Basin in Wyoming, and you'll see from this map that there's a significant number of large companies that have been mining uranium via in situ recovery technique in Wyoming. As I said earlier, it started in the 60s and really was hit its straps commercially in the 80s. And there are 7 operable facilities in Wyoming, and there's 2 more licensed. So next slide. The projects that we've acquired, and there's you can see them on the map here with the Thor claims, Loki, Wicket, Odin, Logray. They were selected, Branca resources that we've acquired, selected these based on their proximity to the redox, the known redox front, and with the help of Doug Beam and James Bauman, who I'll talk about a little bit in a minute. So the projects were selected because of their proximity to the redox boundary, but also with the guidance of some historical exploration information from Kerr-McGee, and also because of their location in close proximity to UR Energy's Lost Creek ISR plant. And UR Energy claimed that to be the lowest cost uranium producer outside Kazakhstan, which is a pretty big claim. So we think this is very fertile ground to commence exploration. So we're in the process of confirming permitting in conjunction with Branca. We're due to settle on the acquisition soon, but we'll be working with Branca closely to get the exploration permits in place for around 15,000 metres of drilling, which we hope to kick off before Christmas. We like this Thor project. Water table's pretty shallow here, and we believe from the historical information that we have that this is the most fertile ground of the package that we can get kicked off on. I've touched on a few things on this slide already, but the Great Divide Basin is probably the least explored and developed of the basins in Wyoming, and pretty much as long as these ISR deposits are below the water table and the geotechnics are favourable, they're amenable to low-cost ISR mining. Generally speaking, in Wyoming, the lixiviant used is alkaline. I know that there's been quite a lot of experimentation with acid leach, but alkaline seems to be the most favourable. So that combined with IX makes the process quite relatively environmentally friendly. It's notable that Wyoming has been a massive coal producer and thermal coal electricity producer over the years, and that business is obviously in decline. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett through Pacific Corp have identified the opportunity to build a nuclear power plant on an old coal-fired power station site. And they've announced that that's their intention. Wyoming is very supportive of both uranium mining and obviously the energy business. So we see a strong future there in the nuclear business for Wyoming. So I touched on the discovery team before. Doug Beam has been at it in Wyoming since the 70s and worked for most of the majors. He discovered the Jab deposit, which if you were to refer back to slide 2, you'd see the Jab and Antelope deposits, which are uranium-1 deposits. Doug discovered that and has a very illustrious career in both exploration and mine development, rehab, and what have you in Wyoming. And James Bauman similarly has a good, strong history in the Red Desert in Wyoming, having built High Plains Uranium and sold that in 2006. And so, look, the acquisition was announced a few weeks ago. We're in the process of working through the due diligence, and we've lodged a notice of meeting to approve the issue of the shares. So we think that we'll be in a position to close the acquisition and move on by the end of October. We've just completed part of our capital raising program, $2 million placement. We also had around $900,000 worth of options exercised during the week, and a non-renounceable rights issue prospectus has been sent out, which will raise another $1.5 million. There's also a free attaching option on a 1-for-4 basis with those capital raisings, with a 3-cent strike at 3 years, and we'll be looking to list those once the rights issue is closed. The vendors have also put their hand up for a placement of $600,000, which will get completed at settlement as well. There's a corporate summary there at 3.5 cents. We've currently got a market cap of around 30 million at the end of the transaction. If we sustain that share price, it'll be around 40, and we'll have around about $6.8 million in the bank, and then there's some acquisition vendor fees to come out of that as well. So we'll be left with a good cash balance in order to support our exploration activities. Next slide, please. So look, what should we be looking forward to? As I said earlier, we should be in a position to close the acquisition around and settle on the acquisition around the end of October, which with the drilling permits in place should allow us to drill prior to Christmas. Things get pretty cold in the desert in Wyoming, in the Red Desert, but we're hopeful that we'll be drilling before Christmas with some results in the new year. And just to note that we are also continuing an exploration program at our Utah projects, which are down the road from Energy Fuels White Mesa Mill. And we'll look to provide a bit more detail to shareholders on an exploration program that we'll get into before Christmas. Thanks very much.
Bruce, thank you for the great presentation. We've had quite a few questions come through, which you've already answered, but it is about your ISR based on either alkaline or acid. Maybe you want to touch on that again.
Yeah, look, until you actually get into the development process, it won't be certain, but it's likely to be an alkaline leach and an IX process, so no solvent used. So it's part of the attraction of ISR, and particularly in the sandstone-hosted uranium, is that the impact on groundwater is very low, and generally speaking, it's a low-impact mining activity. So we look forward to getting into that.
And finally, Bruce, it seems like you're well funded, obviously, with the placements you've recently done. What are you most excited about? And what should shareholders be looking forward to?
Look, I think we're clearly focused on defining a resource there in the Great Divide Basin, and we're targeting doing that early in the new year. So we're not talking about doing it in 6, 9 or 12 months' time. We're looking for a positive yield from this first drilling campaign. So that's what we're really looking out for.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us on Broker Briefing. We're looking forward to some further updates.
Great. Thanks, Jane.
And of course, a copy of today's presentation will be available online on brokerbriefing.com in the coming days.